Alright, we're back, and today I'm going to talk about the Philidor defense. Um, the Philidor defense is kind of the basis for all the defenses, and that's because in a lot of the other defenses, if the attacker chooses to, he can transpose it into a Philidor, and if you don't know how to defend the Philidor, you can't really draw ever, except for the back rank defense, which I just showed you. So the Philidor defense works for any pawn, and you have to have a few things set up for it to work. First of all, your king has to be on one of these squares in front of the pawn, and the pawn, or rather the king, the attacking king cannot have already reached the 6th rank before the pawn. So if the king is already, say, um, on the 6th rank, that well, so, I mean, all right. In this case, it doesn't really matter. Like even if white were to have his king here, um, the it wouldn't matter because he would check him off of it, so it wouldn't really be like he was in the 6th rank. But if the white king for whatever reason had reached this square, then the Philidor wouldn't wouldn't work because the check would you have a pawn block. So you'll see what I mean in a second. So the first stage in the Philidor defense is to put your rook on the 6th rank, um, and just and now all you have to do is shuffle your rook, and if they check you, move your king to this square, and then back to this square. Just stay on these squares. And this is the first stage of the defense. You basically are inducing white to push this pawn forward. Any other try by white, maybe try to trade rooks or something, will result in a drawn pawn endgame. So let's try it. Let's say that white tries this. Oops, sorry, I always forget to do this. Okay, and then we shuffle, and then he plays something like this to break the Philidor defense. Well, if we just take, this is a drawn pawn endgame, um, as you guys should see. So just draw. There's no way to win. Um, so let's say that's the first stage. So what if white does kind of go for this? Well, this is the second stage. Once this pawn has been pushed, um, the he will have no real shelter from checks from the back. So black will go as far back as he can. In this case, the first rank, and he'll just start checking. There's no real way for white to stay out. So if white, the only way white can prevent checks in this case would be like go somewhere like here, but we just move our king up, and there's no way for him to do anything. If he ever moves his rook, then we just check indefinitely. Actually, here we just win the pawn. So, um, in general, I should say this. In general, in rook endgames, the perfect distance for a rook to be able to do these kinds of checking maneuvers, because it's not just the Philidor. There's a lot of drawing methods involved. For example, in H&L defense, there's one variation where you have to do this same kind of maneuver, but it's on the side. But for it to work, you have to always have this buffer. You have to have 3 square buffer, and the reason is that let's say I'll show you. Let's say that the buffer is let me get closer. Let's say the buffer is 2 squares. Then white has an interesting maneuver that lets him get to one of these 2 squares. So let's say check. I mean just a zigzag, but with the 3 squares. Usually, if he does that, the pawn will hang because he's way too far away. So oops. So in this case, for example, this pawn is gonna fall. So remember the 3 square checking distance. But anyway, back to the Philidor. So there's only 2 stages. It doesn't matter what pawn it is. It's very powerful defense. But you have to be able to know when you can identify it. For example, let me modify the position. Let's say that the king was here. and this rook was here, if this were the position and you were black, then if you played this move, that would be a big mistake. You would just lose immediately. Or actually, this might still be a draw because of the rook placement, but let me change that so it's not a draw. Let's say this rook is, over here. Here, this would be a big mistake because that would force you to a back rank defense, right? And then we know the back rank defense doesn't work with the bishop's pawns. So, sorry, this rook is not helping in this position. Okay. So here, for example, the draw would only come about with this move. This would be the drawing move, and we'll go over that at some other point.